Today we're talking about the Pergear 25mm f1.8 versus a 7artisans version of that same lens. Which one is better? Let's find out. Let's do this. What's up, YouTube? I hope you all are doing well. If you're new to the channel, my name is Anson, and here on the channel we talk about filmmaking gear, specifically gear for the budget-conscious filmmaker. So if that's you, consider subscribing. Today is the battle of the 25mm. We're talking about the Pergear 25mm f1.8 versus the 7artisans 25mm f1.8, and we're going to talk about these lenses in a couple different categories. Now, both of these lenses have their own reviews on my channel, and both of these lenses have been sent to me from these companies. But as always, they have not requested I say anything specifically about each one of these lenses, and so you're going to get my full and honest opinion and full and honest comparison of these two lenses. Now, because both of these have been reviewed on my channel, I'm going to actually approach this a little bit differently than my normal reviews. We're going to be comparing these lenses in several different aspects. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it, starting first with sharpness. Because we do have a lot of different categories, I'm going to try to get more to the point with these. And so first and foremost, with sharpness, I do believe that 7artisans has a little bit better sharpness than the Pergear lens. Kind of like what we talked about with a 7.5mm comparison, the Pergear lens is going to be a little bit more soft. But like we talked about before, that actually may be a preference for some people if they're looking for more of a vintage vibe or a vintage film look with their image, because the 7artisans is going to be a little bit more sharp and offer a little bit more contrast. And so it really just depends on the picture that you want for these two lenses. But if we're being objective and saying just sharpness, the 7artisans is going to be a little bit more sharp than the Pergear lens. So from there, let's talk about low light. And that's where these two lenses are very much neck and neck. They both offer a 1.8 aperture. And so when I did some low light comparisons, I actually couldn't tell the two apart. When I was looking at the raw footage, I actually thought that the 7artisans was the Pergear lens and the Pergear lens was the 7artisans lens. That's how neck and neck they are when it comes to low light performance. So when it comes to low light, I think it's a little bit more of a tie. So from there, let's talk about focus breathing. Now, both of these lenses are going to have a decent amount of focus breathing. And I'll be the first to say that the presence of focus breathing with these two lenses should not be a surprise, being that they're $70 lenses. But I will say that the Pergear has less focus breathing, or not as obvious focus breathing, or maybe focus breathing that isn't as distracting as the 7artisans. Now, you'll find that this is a general theme. I think that the 7artisans is geared more towards photographers, and the Pergear may be geared more towards filmmakers. And so as a filmmaker, you want something that has a little bit more controlled focus breathing, which I believe that the Pergear has a little bit more of. So check for Pergear. So let's move on to the next category, which is flaring. Now, honestly, these are tests I have never done on this channel before, so it may be a little bit different, but I'll be honest, I thought the flaring test looked kind of cool, so we're adopting that in all of our reviews. But that being said, both had very similar flaring. If anything, there was a slight edge on the 7artisans lens, just because the Pergear lens, the flaring seemed less controlled. It looked a little bit more sporadic. Next up is bokeh. Now, this is where I give a point to Pergear, simply because both offer similar bokeh, but I felt like the Pergear lens had a softer, a little bit more rounded bokeh. The 7artisans seemed a little bit rough on the edges, a little bit more distracting. Now again, that may come up to preference, but again, if you're asking my preference, I personally prefer the bokeh of the Pergear lens. And so I'm going to give a point to Pergear. Next up is a minimum focusing distance. And I'm just going to give a point to 7artisans because the Pergear did not have great minimum focusing distance. I think I got at least 6 inches closer with the 7artisans lens. And so the 7artisans lens definitely takes the cake when it comes to minimum focusing distance. And there's really nothing else to say about that other than 7artisans wins in this category of minimum focusing distance. And so if that's something you're interested in, definitely head towards the 7artisans lens. And the last thing is going to be build and design. Now, this is where I like things on both lenses. I actually prefer the focusing ring on the Pergear lens because with a lens this short, it's really hard to grab the focusing ring on the 7artisans because it's flat, whereas the Pergear lens does offer these grooves for extra grab. That's a weird way of saying that, but That's what it offers. But when it comes to pretty much everything else as far as design, I actually prefer the 7artisans. I feel like it's a little bit darker of a profile, which I'm always a fan of, and it's just a little bit lighter. This one is a little bit heavier. So again, that may come up to preference. If you like heavier lenses, this is going to offer you a little bit more weight, a little bit more heft to it. This is going to be a little bit more low profile, a little bit easier to carry around. And so I think if you're on a smaller camera, you're trying to be more compact, this is a great option, which makes sense because originally when I reviewed this lens, it was on the Canon EOS M, which is a super small system. And so it made sense with this. But if I'm talking about something like the Blackmagic where I need a little bit more weight to it, I'm actually leaning towards the Pergear. At the end of the day, these both offer a really good build and design. And I know I've said it repeatedly, but it comes up to preference. Maybe instead of preference, more so what you actually need as far as what you're using for your project. So if I'm using a Blackmagic and I need weight on my rig, I may be using something more like this. But if I'm working with a Canon EOS M or maybe a smaller setup, I'm going to use something like this. And so it really just depends on what you're using and potentially what your preference is. And again, I'm sorry, I'm saying a lot about preference, but ultimately that's what it comes up to. These are both amazing, amazing lenses for the price, and it ultimately comes up to what you prefer. So that's a perfect segue into my overall thoughts or my conclusion to this comparison. If we're talking about like an official score on these lenses, I think the 7artisans, I couldn't keep up in my head where everything was, but I think the 7artisans won, but ultimately these things come down to preference. And so the score is really more of a fun thing to kind of keep up with which one won, but really both of these are great options. These are both an amazing option for a $70 to $75 lens. And so if you are on a micro budget for your projects, definitely check out one of these two 25mm lenses. Either one of them is going to do the job. It really comes up to what you prefer or what type of project you're doing. And I love this category of lenses. I love that this market exists because it does give opportunity to new filmmakers to get into filmmaking without having to break the bank. And this is an option to go with these 25mm lenses for $70. And the fact that you get the images that you get out of these lenses is amazing. So like I said, you cannot go wrong with either one. So at the end of the day, look at the footage, see which one makes sense for you, and go buy that one. Use the links in the description. Much appreciated. So that's it for me. I do want to thank Pergear and 7artisans for sending me both of these lenses. I hope to do more of these. I do want to do a video talking about using these lenses in paid environments. So if you are interested in that, let me know in the comments below and we'll definitely make that happen. As always, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to give it a like. If you're digging the overall content from the channel, consider subscribing. Thank you all for joining. Go and find your journey. Go embrace life. Stay safe, be happy, support each other, and please support each other. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world right now, and we need to come together, be a community of people. And I know I'm going off on a soapbox here, but support each other. Everybody deserves to be treated equally. No man is greater than another. So treat everyone that way. Treat everyone with fairness. Treat everybody in love. And we can definitely get through this crazy ass time that's going on in our world right now. And oh yeah, wash those hands. I'll see you here next time. Peace.
This woman is a champ. She got eaten up by bugs. She's not in focus. She got eaten up by bugs. She's been a great model. My beautiful wife, everyone.